and welcome back. This is the Time Out Podcast, your bi weekly podcast focusing on major highlights in sports in Kenya and across the globe. Behind the scenes happening both on and off the pitch, numbers, human interest stories in sport, and a look at the future talent in sport. My name is Richard Wanjohi, and I'm joined by Michael Kwambo, my co host.
Hi, Richie. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, and yeah, we're back in this. But why do we do timeout? Timeout means taking time out. I think we had taken too much time out. Basically, a break to re-strategize, re-energize, and rebuild. But we are back on this gig. Straight off the bat, let's go to football action in Kenya. We've been looking at the FKF Cup. Very interesting setup. Kwambo, AFC, and Gore. What do you think?
Well, it's a fairy tale final. It's a dream final. I mean, who wouldn't want the two biggest clubs in the country competing for the FKF Cup? Remember, they're also in contention for the FKF League title. So, good stuff from them in making that come through. But also, you have to give credit to Equity and Bitcoin United for making these two teams sweat for their final berths. And before that, there's Bungoma Superstars, who gave AFC Leopards a hard time in the quarterfinal. It has been a romantic journey to the final for both teams. And I mean, I think in that one, football is the winner. It's a pity that we probably still will not have fans on that day. But I mean, you have to give it to both teams for setting up that dream final.
It's interesting as you say this because they follow each other on the on the league standings. So we don't know whether the rivalry will just continue off the cup final, or does it go all the way to the wire in the league as well?
Well, I think in the league, Gore is a lot more poised. I am fearful of Gore right now. I think they've won 10 games on the bounce. That's
Mhm.
inclusive of league and cup competitions, 10 games in a row. And they're now at that point where they're grinding out the results. They have a
Mhm.
number of big time players in the team. I think the leadership of Haron Shakava, who has come back from his sojourn in Zambia, has brought a lot of stability to Gore. And you can see that the pressure is now on AFC Leopards, KCB, and Tusker, who, in my opinion, are very likely to crumble over the past few weeks that are coming up. And, for Gore, it's cruise control. They pretty much remind me of a Kenyan marathoner in the
Mhm.
final stretch of an important race.
Indeed. And talking of Zambian league, we have Jesse Were, Zesco United, who are on the verge of winning the Zambian Premier League. Any updates on that?
Yeah, well, they actually did win it. They posted a result against, they're playing against Napster Stars in a game that they needed to win. It's unfortunate for Napster Stars that this is a team that this season represented Zambia in the Confederation Cup, but they've had a very difficult season domestically. They're actually in the relegation slots, and they needed to win against Zesco to stay up in the Zambian top flight. They lost, and it's unfortunate for the likes of David Owino Calabar, who moved from Zesco to Napsa Stars. He will be going down with that team to the second tier of Zambian football. But for Jesse Were, of course, he had already set another milestone weeks earlier by scoring his 100th goal for Zesco. He's already the club's all-time goal scorer. And I mean, I'm happy for him, for John Mark Makwata and Ian Otieno, the Harambee Stars
Ian Otieno.
goalkeeper, the trio
Mhm.
of Kenyans who, I mean, they're league champions in Zambia. So, I mean, that's something that we need to celebrate.
Yeah, it's Kenyan exports doing us proud across the borders. And talking of
Yes.
coming back home, we have the Rugby Butchers Cup coming up in Nairobi. That starts in 2 days. What's the action like, and what can rugby lovers expect?
Well, we are looking forward to seeing the next crop of Kenyan, sorry, not only Kenyan, but the next crop of African rugby stars emerge and do their thing on the continental stage. Remember, in previous years, we've seen the likes of Kenya, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Earth stars who have gone on to become mainstays for their national team. The likes of Oscar Ouma, Biko Adema for Kenya have all come through the age grade ranks. They've played in the precursor of this tournament when it was the Rugby Africa Under-19 Championship. Some played in the JWRT way back in 2009, the likes of Curtis Silako, Michael Wanjala. So it has always been the first port of call for future Rugby African stars. So that is what we're expecting again in 2021.
Perfect. And still sticking with rugby, I think we over the weekend we had some action in the Moi Kasarani Stadium, where the team Kenya was selected for athletics and for field events as well. What do you say about the rugby camp that the team, the Shujaa, have been going through in South Africa, and what do you think this will help in preparing for the Olympics?
Yeah, well, the camps have been beneficial to the team, according to Innocent Simiu. He's had an opportunity to test the 21 or so players who he has been working with as he looks to narrow it down to his 12 who are going to represent the country in Tokyo. They've been good in that point of view. They've also been good in the fact that the players have been able to get their rugby education going. Some of them have done refresher courses in level 1 coaching and officiating so that they continue to have a better grasp of the laws of the game, which I think is good in terms of building resource and capacity, because at the end of the day, when you're coming towards the close of your rugby playing career, you probably need to look at going on to a next stage. Are you going to become a match official or a coach? But it's good to have that education early, but also so that you understand the game, because the game of rugby is quite dynamic, and the rules keep being modified every so often. And you find that sometimes the national teams suffer when they're on the international circuit because they have been unable to grasp the changes to the laws of the game. So in that aspect, that technical aspect, it's also good. But also in terms of just giving everybody a run out, getting them to experience competition environments has been good.
Perfect. And going back to Kasarani again, we saw over the week, the better part of last week, Team Kenya, especially in the athletics, won their selection and their places in the final team that is traveling in Tokyo in a few weeks. Who was your standout over the weekend?
Ferdinand Omanyala, we've been talking about this gentleman. I'm happy that that the National Olympic Committee have doubled down on their stance to not select people accused of doping violations in the past. I mean, there's always a good story behind some of these incidences. And for Ferdinand Omanyala, of course, we know that he doped inadvertently, was not his intention. He served his time. Was it 14 or 17 months? I'm not too sure. He's come back. He faced a lot of ostracization from the very same Athletics Kenya. He ran record times in Nigeria. Basically, he was told that race was not sanctioned. Therefore, we cannot ratify your record. But he still comes back to Kasarani. He's been persistent, comes back to Kasarani, runs the fastest time on Kenyan soil in a very long time, 10.02. That is a world-class time. And also pushes Mark Otieno to qualification. Mark Otieno literally making the qualification with the lower end of the qualification mark at 10.05. So for the two of them, it's good. And also it's important to note that Kenya will be having a sprinter in the 100 meters race for the first time since 1996, when Donald Onchiri represented Kenya in the 100 meters, but he didn't make it to the medal rounds, buying out in the heats with a time of 10.66. So the fact that Omanyala and Otieno have qualified for me is a big thing, but it also goes to support that long-held belief that there is so much potential in the sprints in Kenya. It needs the investment, it needs the commitment. There's a light note where Mark Otieno said he raced in borrowed spikes, and there was quite a number of Twitter bigwigs, for lack of a better word, who went on to chide the government for failing to buy him spikes. Richie, you and I both know that is a personal that's a personal thing. It's like let me be a bit more rogue and say it's like asking the government to buy you bikers for your sporting activities. I mean, that's a personal investment for him. And I mean, now that he's part of Team Kenya, yes, he'll still be subject to getting the full kitting. But again, if it's not comfortable for him, he has to get what works for him. So at the end of the day, borrowed spikes or not, it's good that these two gentlemen are running in the Olympics. I'll be rooting for them and the team sports, the volleyball and the rugby sevens teams as well.
Indeed, as we keep saying here at the Time Out podcast, we had predicted and put Ferdinand Omanyala on the crystal ball and predicted that he would make things happen. We didn't know this would be as soon as, as it has happened. Excuse me. Going back again to the selection, I think for me the surprises were in some of the medium race or middle races. I think the steeplechase, we still have a bit of a challenge. I think Kiprono was supposed to be doing some GP or Grand Prix in Europe, and I think he's still having a challenge with the times. But let's hope that this tradition of maintaining the gold in the steeplechase is retained as we go into Tokyo, and hopefully, as you said, for the team sports as well, we perform well and perform better than previous outings.
Yeah, indeed. Although I do admit there's such a big concern more so with the 3,000-meter steeplechase. Never have we been this unsure. And people like talking about Conseslus Kipruto, saying that he always pulls it off at the last minute. But Richie, you
Mhm.
can't keep winging it. You can't keep winging it. He winged it in
Precisely.
2019 in Doha. I know he winged it again in 2017, if I'm not wrong.
Mhm.
When he was coming off a rough patch and off injury and just basically dug deep. But remember, his opponents have been working day and night. And Ethiopia in particular have an 18-year-old gentleman. I forget his name, but
Mhm.
the lad really is showing up. And then we have the Moroccan opponents as well, who are also knocking hard on the door. And for the very first time, Kenya is exposed in the 3,000 meters steeplechase. I'm not counting a medal this far. If it comes, of course, I'll celebrate like everybody else. But for me, it's
Mhm.
not a medal that I'm banking on right now. That will be a bonus.
Definitely, that's in under a month's time. And talking about European stuff happening, what's happening in Europe? We have the Euro 2000, Euro 2020. What was supposed to happen last year was brought forward to this year, and what an interesting tournament so far. Um, Teams traversing Europe in the 12 capitals. You play one game today, you're flown to the next tomorrow. What has been your highlight so far, Kwambo, in the last couple of days in Euro 2020?
Well, I'll give you three highlights. Number one, the fact that you said teams traversing throughout Europe. I think for me, it changes the whole aspect of hosting events. You see, the same way that we've been doing the Champions League, probably the format that now will be taking place for the Euros moving forward, because it eases a lot in terms of logistics. It's not only with one host nation, but it's across the board. Um, that's it in terms of it easing the logistics. Number two, the valiant efforts of the medics to resuscitate Christian Eriksen when he went down with what has now been confirmed to be a cardiac arrest in that opening match of the Euros. I think for me they were the unsung heroes and they'll remain the unsung heroes. It also, for me, posed a question on our medical response systems, not only in Kenya, but across the African continent. We tend to take this aspect of event organization rather lightly. And I mean, that was the second highlight. Then third, the German machine at dismantling Portugal. You know, everybody, I remember this is a game I was watching at home when I was back in Western over the weekend. I was watching
Mhm.
it and I already told someone that Germany's response today will be massive. They don't have a star player like Portugal who are counting on
Mhm.
Cristiano Ronaldo. And you just saw that when they engaged on their gears, they really put in a shift. And I think that game should have even ended 7 or more. But they were a bit careless at the back. But Joachim Low and his manifestation of attacking football, the best form of defense is attack. They showed that, and after they'd been written off against France, don't count Germany off. I still rate them highly in terms of lifting the title. For Portugal, they can kiss the Euro title goodbye.
Interesting, because that was also my second game to have watched from the Euro to 2020.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I'd also watched the German France game. Initially, I thought Germany were looking a bit all over the place, but I think towards the end, in as much as they lost to France, as you're saying, once they got the connections right and the combinations, and Joachim Low insisted on putting, I think, the same team that he played France with, maybe just a few changes, especially for Nabri at the front. And we saw all the passes coming in, and they just converted them. Because every time they would go forward, I would tell my, I was also watching it with my family. I was telling them, this is the typical German play. Use the wings, cross in the middle, anything ahead now or a shot, bang inside. As you say, Portugal looked over at Ronaldo too much. I think if he gets injured or something happens to him, they go to the last 16. That's it for them. Because when you have a star player, then when he doesn't perform or has his off day, then that's it. Excuse me. I think the other highlight for me so far for the Euro 2020s, it's off the pitch action. Basically started off by Cristiano Ronaldo. Um, the plucking off of branded material, specifically the Coca-Cola bottle. Pogba followed up with the Heineken. I think there's another player who also shifted on a couple of bottles during his press conference. But then UEFA came heavy or over the weekend, and they insisted on players not touching any merchandise because that's where the action happens for them in the bank. But so far, I think it's been an interesting tournament. But shifting across continents, we go to Copa America. Messi finally finding his mojo. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm enjoying the Copa America. I'm just liking the action as well. There's nothing much to say because I'll be stating the obvious.
Yeah, I think for me, I think Argentina, unless anything tragic happens, they look like favorites for this tournament. I think they beat Uruguay over the weekend, if I'm not wrong. Neymar and Brazil, I think they've been too.
There's
There's just
always
something
there's
that is
always that question mark
clicking.
about Neymar. There's always that question mark about Neymar. He could be brilliant, but for me, I don't feel that he has the mental fortitude to lead the team to anything. He's a brilliant player, yes, but he's just not mentally strong. Not as mentally strong as even Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho was the master joker of the Brazilian team, but he could pull a rabbit out of a hat when required. We had the likes of Rivaldo. Rivaldo was no nonsense when he was in that midfield. He was a Brazilian, in my opinion, with the mindset of a German because he was just ruthlessly efficient. The talent of the
Mhm,
Brazilian, but single-minded
mhm.
focus. For me, Neymar tends to get distracted, tends to whine a lot, and I feel those are the things that make him unable to carry Brazil to greater glory. Like you said, Argentina, they are looking good. If they win it, well and good. I am really not putting my money on Brazil much as I am a fanatical follower of Brazil throughout the years. Not with Neymar in that squad.
And as you say, Neymar, I think is bringing his PSG, fever or behavior back into national team. And when you wear the 5 star, I mean, it's supposed to be a sense of pride. It's supposed to bring something out of you. But I think, as you say, he's too much of a whiner. He doesn't know when to step up to the plate. We saw what happened when they were playing with Man City in the club, PSG, Man City. I mean, I would have given it to them and thought that they would go all the way, but yeah, so far we've seen what he can do when push comes to shove. Um, moving swiftly, we go to the NBA playoffs. We are finally at the the conference finals, the Eastern and Western. What an unpredictable playoffs that we've had.
Yeah, they've been so unpredictable that at some point all you can do is just sit and watch because you've been rooting for what you quote unquote call the favorites, and then they come up short. For me, once the Lakers were eliminated, once LeBron was out, I think it was a deflating feeling, and I was like, let me just continue watching this. And it's one of those seasons where you say anything goes. It reminds me of the season when Leicester City won the English Premier League. That's how open it was. So I think right now it's to enjoy the basketball as it comes, and I mean celebrate the winner at the end of the day.
Yes, we have first timers in the finals. The LA Clippers, who have never played before in any final, conference final or otherwise. Um,
Imagine.
we have the Bucks, who eliminated who was supposed to be the favorite, the Brooklyn Nets, because they had started players, the likes of Kevin Durant, the likes of Blake Griffin. But when I watched that game, and you're looking at the team going into overtime, and you're like, can't you just kill the game? Because then I mean, when I look back at what Jordan was saying in his documentary on the Last Dance last year. Nowadays, we don't see that hunger for titles. You don't see that effort for players to push it all the way. Because if you look at what was happening between the Nets and the Bucks, Giannis knew for sure he was going to get into the finals, and he carried the whole team. On the other hand, Durant, they tried all they could, but the rest of the team sort of felt like, you can do it. We'll just cheer you on, and that's, I think, is what has happened in the rest of the season. We've seen a very challenging way of playing the playoffs. But I think now we have the two conferences to be decided. We have in the East the Phoenix Suns and the Clippers, LA Clippers. So far, the Phoenix Suns lead 1-0 into the best of 7 games. In the West, we have the Milwaukee Bucks and Atlanta Hawks. This starts tomorrow, but again, I'll put my money on the Bucks purely and largely due to Giannis from the Greek nation.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. They've carried their form, and looking as overwhelming favorites, it'll probably only take them. It'll only it'll be themselves to blame if they're unable to win the conference title and go ahead to compete for the overall NBA title, which the Americans love calling the world title.
Everything for Americans is in the I always call it in the superlative. World best,
Yeah.
most. But talking about another American, Naomi Osaka, she withdrew from the Roland Garros, and now again she's told the Wimbledon organizers that she's not showing up. She's just going to be in Tokyo preparing for the Olympics. What do you say about this?
Hey, you know me, I'm old school. I'm old school. So being old school, I'll say that she's being soft. She's being soft. Yeah, I mean, we believe in those terms. Show up every day, no matter what. Yes, we are all fighting battles.
Mhm.
And she'll talk about mental health, about her battling depression, but you forget that for these events you are obligated. That's why you're a professional athlete. I'm not in any way downplaying that yes, she values her mental health. I'm just saying that I mean there's obligations that you need to meet in terms of media and so on and so forth. And
Mhm.
that's why you took up this sport in the first place, to make money, to earn winnings and everything. If you can't handle it, if you can't stand the heat, get
Mhm.
out of the kitchen. That's
Mhm.
just me, like I said, being old school. That's how I look at it. Um, in the words of my former boss, we're dealing with millennials, so it's a totally different engagement with them altogether. Because yes, we tough it out, we go through our problems, we talk about them as well. But to the extent of that, wow, the world is changing.
Mhm.
That's how I look at it, and let it be. So I respect her decision at the end of the day. She's opted to play in front of her home crowd in Tokyo during the Olympics. If she wins it, then well and good. The reason I also say that is because I think you saw the response from Serena Williams. Was it Venus Williams? She said
Mhm.
she's able to take on these guys because one, they don't know the sport. Yeah, yeah. So she already has something over them. But again, we'd have to look at it and say Venus Williams is our generation. She's old school like us. So I mean, we're two different pieces in a pod. And I guess there'll always be different ways of looking at Naomi Osaka's decision to not play in the French Open, to withdraw from the French Open, and all also not playing well.
Interestingly, this was going to be the topic for our session today: mental wellness and health, and also just looking at what has been going on. Because, as you mentioned earlier, we had Christian Eriksen collapsing in the Danish game. We also have Naomi Osaka now withdrawing from the tournament. Is it because of, for me, I'm looking at it, is it because of what has happened over the period of the pandemic, or is it because players currently are just handled too fragile, they've become too fragile to be handled and pushed to that extent that they don't want to, assert themselves and finding it easier to just withdraw or resign or just take off.
I'd like to think that there's that element of fragility, because when you mention that, it also brings me back to an individual like Neymar, who, like I said, I don't think has the leadership qualities to guide Brazil to anything. When you look back at the mentality of athletes from days gone by, the likes of Michael Jordan, who I'm sure if he was on a basketball team right now, he'd be viewed as a toxic teammate by everybody because of his desire to win and get the biggest results. The likes of even Didier Drogba, for what he did for Chelsea,
That's right.
literally stepping up to the plate. The likes of Roy Keane, Patrick Vieira, the literal hard men of the game. I mean, you look at the sport these days and you have to treat the athlete with kidney gloves, because, again, like I said, it probably is a generational transition, and we have to look at individuals differently. So they are a lot more fragile, and it is contributing to what we're seeing now. And then just the fact that there's so much sensitivity about things. Yes, I do understand there's a lot more in terms of endorsements and everything, all these obligations that you have to meet. And what's happened is also that, for me, the latter day athlete has become meek. And I'll always look at the example of Muhammad Ali, who spoke his mind, who was obnoxious when he needed to be, was outspoken when he needed to be, because he stayed true to himself. The likes of Pele, these are people who are much more than athletes. They are social icons, but it's not what we're seeing these days. I do accept that, yes, there are challenges, there are pressures, especially with the onset of things like technology, like social media, and so on and so forth. But I also believe that it's how you package yourself, it's how you handle the situation at the end of the day. So this is probably a conversation that we would have for days on end. And maybe Richie, me and you need to invite a millennial to the show so that we can get to see things from their point of view. Because for me, I just don't get it. I probably never will, but it would be good to understand.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you say, when I was watching the NBA game between the Brooklyn Nets and the Bucks, immediately the Bucks won the game. You're seeing people smiling on the court. It's like they've been champs. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to say hi or sort of congratulate the team, but they took it so casually that you'd almost think they were in the same team. It's not like they're having
Exactly.
a rivalry.
Yeah,
And then also, if you look
exactly.
at a guy like Ronaldo or Cristiano, in as much as his team is losing, he's always going to push you and ask you, what are you doing on the pitch if you're not going to deliver a good pass or doing a good thing? And I think that generation, as you're saying, is coming to an, they're slowly being faced off, and we have a lot of diplomacy, so to say, in sport. Very um, soft. I didn't want to use the word soft, but
But inevitably, you had to.
inevitably it has just come out because I mean, as Osaka, I was trying to understand what her logic was, but as you say, it's out there on what millennials are going through and what the current situation is. Um, thanks. You're watching or listening to the podcast, Time Out Podcast. We have been here for the last couple of minutes. Kwambo, let's go quickly as we try to sum this down. We have two events coming up this week. The Safari Nani back on the WRC. What do you think about that from the 24th to the 27th of June?
Well, I mean, the rally coming back to Kenya after 19 years as part of the WRC that's already a major thing. It's a big milestone. I do expect the Frenchman Sebastien Ogier, who is in the twilight of his racing career, to continue his dominance of the season. Of course, he says Kenya is a testing ground in terms of it's a challenging venue in terms of man and machine. And all I can say for him is he's lucky he's 20 years late. There were years when you do 4,000 kilometers around the country, the rally that used to end with probably 12 finishers. But I think he's in good stead to come and finish it. I mean, with all the computerization, the fast course at Soisambu, which is still challenging to many of the outside drivers, will favor him. And that's that. I'm also happy to see the 91-year-old Polish driver, I forget his name. He competed in the 1997 Safari. He finished 12th. He's 91, you know? He's
Indeed.
91. It's 6 years younger than the late Kenneth Kaunda, who died last week, and still going strong. And he's going to be here navigating the rally. I think those are some of the highlights for me. Of course, there's the Kenyan crews who have gotten sponsorships from various local corporates. I mean, it's good that they've gotten the backing, although I was on another forum and I was asked about my sentiments, and I felt that the backing should not only be for the rally. I mean, if the corporates are coming through, let them come through the entire season so that you actually have a journey with them. Because from what it looks like right now, it's purely for PR purposes. I mean, you're going to sponsor them for the rally, and then what happens after that? You know, I'd rather it be a consistent thing. But back to what I've said, it's good to have the rally back. Now we also have the Battles Cup, which is happening, and for me, I'm happy that Kenya is finally at a place where we are able to host multiple international sporting events around the same time without being stretched thin for capacity. I think that for me is an opportunity for the country to start showcasing itself as a sports tourism destination, or even as a sports destination, just the same way we've been positioning ourselves for conferences and exhibitions. Why can't we do the same for sport? It's an income generator for the country. It opens up opportunities. I mean, let's start looking at it like that. Let's look at these little wins that we're gaining from hosting these two international events around the same time. Then the fact that we still have the under 20s coming up. These are things that we can build on and run away with.
Interesting. Just for your information, the driver is called Dasada, or rather, sorry, the co-driver.
Yeah.
He's turning 91. He's coming. Uh, he'll be racing with Ben Conste. Hey, these names, man.
The difficult
Yeah.
names.
We also have Makrai Kemathi, the son of Phineas Kemathi, the CEO to the Safari Rally. I
Yes,
think he's
yes,
one of
we
the
do.
young
Yeah.
bucks sponsored by Safaricom. But as you say, I think it's a bit of a tragedy that all these corporates are falling over themselves to sponsor teams, to support the event, which is a good thing. We don't deny that, but then let it spread across other sports events, or sorry, sports disciplines as well. I mean, we've seen the struggles that some of these sports disciplines are having, and especially coming from the pandemic, where there was no action and a lot of players and sports people were not engaged. Transitions. I think we have a couple of them that we have not mentioned in the previous podcast, and I think we'll start with the biggest one, Benjamin Ayimba. I think for me, it's still, every day that you go through a headline or a story in the press, and you're like, did it have to happen this way? Did we have to lose such a young? Because to me, he's young. I mean, at 42, at 43, 44, you're not supposed to be going to your grave. It's about time we use such individuals to build sport to become better at what we're doing. Rugby, which so is going to miss him sorely. I think you have better words than me. Good, I'm lost for words.
Well, I'm still at a loss for words. I know that we've got a tribute coming up for Benja because this was a guy who literally mentored me through the rugby circles, welcomed me into Impala Club, encouraged me to take up my position, gave me a nickname. Basically, we played together. We played against each other. We ended up working together when he was coaching the national team, and I was working as a media officer at Kenya Rugby. So it's been a relationship that went full cycle. I still am at a loss for words, and every so often I just wonder, like you, did this really have to happen? But as it so did, it happened, and still at this point in time, still send my condolences to his friends, his family, and just asking them, the entire rugby fraternity, to stay strong. This one, it cut deep, and then being involved in, the whole send off bit of him was also very emotionally draining. It will take time. Probably will not get over it at all. But yeah, it's one of those things that will take time. So for Benja, may his soul continue to rest in peace.
And to our listeners, our fans, part of the reason we could not do this podcast was because of the tributes, or as you're saying, the plans that were going behind the scenes on getting to commemorate or remember him before he was laid to rest. And basically just understanding that whole journey, because for all of us, it has been a shock. It has been something that we did not expect. It's always a feeling that you think that he's going to get through it, he's going to overcome it, but then this one was a big one. The second transition, Alex Olemagero, former AFC chairman, again a big name in the world of football.
Yeah, Alex Olemagelo, he has been a clubman at AFC Leopards. From his days as the treasurer, he has literally carried AFC Leopards on its back. When AFC Leopards was relegated to the second tier of Kenyan football, he stepped into the reins as chairman, and he worked tirelessly to ensure that Leopards is promoted back to the top tier. And he continued to give his service to the club even after leaving his role as chairman. Of course, he went on to politics, and at some point served as the first speaker of the Nairobi County Assembly. But AFC Leopards was never too far from his mind. Another big loss. I mean, a tragedy, but again, like we say, it's life. We all live, we all die. And maybe the question is, what will you be remembered for when you're alive? And for Benja, of course, we saw his legacy in rugby. For Alex Olemagelo, we saw his contributions to AFC Leopards and to sport in general. And I mean, another sad moment for Kenyan sport. It has been heavy.
Definitely. And as we come to the tail end of this session, we have what we call the crystal ball. I'm going to have one name today. This is Kenyan swimmer. She's based in the US, Emily Muteti. She's part of the Kenyan swimming team that will represent us in the Tokyo Olympics. What do you say to this, Kwambo?
Yeah, Emily Muteti, is she the one who also happens to be a law enforcement officer? I think
Definitely.
she's a law enforcement officer. I think it's good that we are able to tap our talent, Kenyan-born talent, from across the diaspora. Of course, there is a school of thought that says we've got capable people out here, but I look at it as harnessing whatever talent you have for the greater good of the country. We've seen other sports, other countries around the world tap up anybody who has got any heritage from their country to actually boost them. And when it comes down to sports like swimming, which are very technical and which require a lot of preparation and very costly, and for Emily Muteti being in an environment where there's a lot of investment in swimming and she's able to hone her skills, I think it's good. I wish her all the best in the Olympic Games.
Definitely. And thank you very much for your time, Michael. Thank you to the audience and the listeners for this week's podcast. It's been myself, Richard, wishing you a great week and great sporting action. We'll try to be back before the end of the week. If not, then we'll see you on the other side of the weekend, of the week of end of June. It's going to be a busy sporting weekend. I think yourself, Kwambo in rugby, and myself getting to the rally in Naivasha. Let's see what happens.
Definitely. And just before we sign out, we also forgot to mention the passing of Zablon Amanaka, former Harambee Stars offensive bulwark, who also died within that same time period that we lost Ayimba, we lost Ole Magelo, and also lost the the former Kenya Hockey International Julius Odera Nyerere, who
Mm.
passed away in Eldoret, and who there's an unfortunate story about that because his body had been detained in a hospital in Eldoret for a 3.5 million shilling bill. It's unfortunate that for our sporting heroes, they have to depart in such painful, unfortunate circumstances.
I think that's a topic we're going to cover in the upcoming podcasts. What happens post playing days and what can the government again and corporates do? Because we are seeing all this money is coming to sport, but then the people who are supposed to benefit, they're dying as paupers and getting into the grave in very bad conditions. But I've been your host Richie, and I'm
This is
out.
Michael Kwambo signing out from Timeout, and we'll catch you again next time.
Have a great week.